everyone, it is that time of the week again where I am giving you guides on the decks I've been playing so far, and this one is going to be a guide on the budget odd rogue. So it's going to be broken into 3 parts: an overview of the deck, changes I would make to the deck, and a full guide on the deck based on like mulligans and just matchups in general, and there will be timestamps in the description. This will be a little better scripted, so don't worry about that. It'll be shorter than a lot of my other guides. And that's basically what I'm going to be trying to do with all of my guides, making them shorter and better. And there will be visuals and bullet points, so you guys, as you're just going through, if you don't use the timestamps, you'll know what part you're in at any given time. So an overview of this deck, it's basically just your standard aggro deck. You have some 1-drops, you play them, then you get your weapon out pretty much every single time, but there are some exceptions, I'll get into that. You play the weapon, you kill whatever first minion that they played on their first turn. Turn 3, you play one of your really, really strong 3-drops, whether it be the Hench Clan Thug or the Vicious Fledgling, if you want to go aggressive. But if you're playing against another aggressive deck, like another Odd Rogue or what turns out to be like a Beast Hunter, you could definitely go for a Tar Creeper play as well. And Blink Fox is just a pretty vanilla standard 3-drop as well. So you have a ton of 3-drop options. And then after that, you just try to capitalize on the fact that your weapon is a form of removal or aggression, depending on what you need. And the fact that all of your minions are really high value. By the time you get to turn 5, ideally you have 2 minions on the board, so you Fungal Mancer them and that pops off. And the thing that this deck lacks really is a surprise attack with the Leeroy Jenkins. So you have a little less surprise potential. So sometimes what you need to do is you actually just need to keep a South Sea deckhand. And I'll get into some changes in the deck in a second that you can do to, deal with the fact that you have no surprise in this deck. But yeah, basically you just go with the value of your weapon to either control the board or use aggression. You generally have a 1-drop, which is really helpful. So if you basically, by being able to play a 1-drop, you cover all of the 1-drop options, whether it's a 1/1 Divine Shield like Argent Squire or the 1/3 Dire Mole. With the weapon, using Argent Squire or Dire Mole or Firefly or any of the 1-drops that you have, you can deal with literally any 1-drop in the game, basically. So don't worry about any 1-drop. You can immediately control the board, gain a little bit of control, try to snowball that control on turn 3 by playing a high-value minion, and then try to snowball it more with Kobold Scalebane to buff your stuff or Fungal Mancer. And don't forget, you always have Vilespine Slayer if they get something big out. You don't ever really need to worry about that. You have Vilespine Slayer and SI Agent to deal with something sticky behind a big taunt. So basically this deck excels at aggression and has some flexibility with the weapon and the fact that you have several removal tactics as well. So changes I would make to this deck, basically there are 2 changes I would make to the deck to make it absolutely optimal. I would take out the Sprint for a Myra's Unstable Element. That, not Long Bomb, I'm sorry, the Hail Mary play with the Myras, even though you're going to go into Fatigue, really if you're in the position where you need to draw a ton of cards, you're in a bad position anyway, or in a position where all you need is like 1 more card to close out the game. The reason why Myra's is better than Sprint is because if you Myra's, you have 5 mana left, so you could still Leeroy if you get him, or play like a File Spine if you get it, or a Fungal Mancer if you get it for some like immediate benefits. So having 5 mana up is very useful. Or you can play a 3-drop and restock your weapon. Myra's is just better than Sprint. Although Sprint doesn't put you into fatigue, so you can keep going afterwards. Myra's is pretty much just better in every single way. I run Sprint just because this is a budget deck. And then I would take out a Kobold Scalebane. I only run 1 in my fully made version of the deck. For a Leeroy, it keeps the mana curve consistent at still the same number of 5-drops, so it doesn't throw off that in any way. And it gives you the surprise with Leeroy for potentially 6 damage just from your hand that they can't really account for. Although secretly, they're always thinking, does he have Leeroy? Does he have Leeroy? Does he have Leeroy? And then boom. This time, since you're not playing the budget deck, you have Leeroy. Those are really the only 2 changes I would make to the deck. If Druid was more popular in Spreading Plague, I'd say maybe Void Whipper, throw it in here as well. Actually, there is one. Oh my goodness, I forgot the name. 1 second. I had to pause to find the name of this and figure out which one it was. But the Chief Inspector, the 5 mana 4/6 destroy all enemy secrets. could definitely be a card you could throw into this deck with the prominence of Hunters. It could be something to play after they either play a Subject 9 or play a couple extra Secrets that they got later on into the game. You can get a ton of value out of it because 4/6 for 5 is pretty decent just on its own. Stat-wise, it's like 10 total stats, which is a solid 5/5. So if you want to get rid of something, maybe get rid of like a Blink Fox to put in a Chief Inspector as well. Does tilt the scales in terms of the mana curve, but that doesn't really matter. You'll still have 9 3-drops left in the deck and a ton of 1-drops. So really, changing one won't really matter. So if you see a lot of Hunters and their Hunters are very popular, a Chief Inspector to deal with their secrets could actually be extremely helpful. That's just something that I personally was like coming up with in my head, and that's what I used in my original Odd Rogue deck that got me to Legend. I actually ran the Chief Inspector because that's when Spell Hunter, at least Spell Hunter, had a little bit of a spike in popularity. Before it became huge, it had like a little spike where I saw more, so I put this card in, and it saved my life multiple times. I was able to play it, got rid of like a Wandering Monster, an Explosive Trap that would have killed some of my minions, and I was able to close out the game. So this card can definitely be very useful as well. So as for matchups, I'll just go through all of them real quick. Warrior, all of the armor and control, absolutely abysmal for you. Losing matchup to every single situation. Shaman, you don't really need to care about Shaman. Even Shaman is probably the one that you'll play most often, and that's, you kind of are favored in that one, but it's really kind of 50-50, depends on luck of the draw, I guess. Warlock, you beat most of the time because of the fact that they use health as a resource to get their control options, so really, you just need to let them use their own health to get stuff while you're building up a board, and you just consistently hit them in the face with a ton of aggressive damage, and you'll probably win. If they're able to get out like their weapon on turn 5 and control Warlock, or control the board as effectively as they can sometimes with Mechathune Warlock, it can be a little bit rough, but that's assuming that they have like an optimal hand, and if they do, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about that. Zoo Warlock is good for you for another reason, and that's because your weapon can be used to pretty much trade into any minion that they play, which controls the board early for you. So basically, for the first couple of turns, both you and the Warlock use health as a resource. He uses health as a resource to put out his Flame Imp, so he takes 3 damage. You use your weapon to kill that Flame Imp, which means that he basically spent his health for nothing. So basically, the trade is he loses a card and 3 health, and basically you just lose 3 health and still have a charge on your weapon. And you just snowball that value off of tons of different minions, and value trade, like trade a 1-drop into a 3/3 and then hit it with your weapon, and slowly use that to gain control of the board with your bigger minions. Start trading in with those, and the only way you really lose this matchup is if he has like Soulfire Doomguard in hand and is able to do 9 surprise damage, or Leeroy Doomguard, or Leeroy Soulfire, or something like that. So that matchup is pretty good because you're able to control the board super duper well with your weapon. Rogue, Odd Rogue's the best rogue out there and the most popular. You play against that, it's a 50-50 matchup. Actually, it doesn't even change with the turns because the coin gives you combos, but going first means that you force the opponent to deal with stuff and have the first opportunity to deal with something the opponent played. Pretty much every other Rogue deck is just objectively worse. Kingsbane was nerfed, Death Rattle Rogue is too slow, Tempo Rogue is just objectively worse, Odd Rogue, Pirate Rogue, nobody plays that, and then there's the Pogo Rogue, which is just never played, but it's just too slow for them to actually do anything with. Then there's Priest. All of the Priest decks are too slow, except for Control Priest, although Priest is a little harder now because of Mass Hysteria being introduced, but Control Priest is probably your worst matchup because of the fact that they have Duskbreaker and a ton of dragons to control the board, with the Scale Worm as well, which is Rush. They have Mass Hysteria and Psychic Scream and Primordial Drake, and the Shadow Reaver Anduin, who basically kills any of the minions that you buffed up with Fungalmancer or a buffed up Henchclan Thug. So really, that's your only troubled matchup, and even then, if they don't have Duskbreaker, you're chillin'. And even if they do have Duskbreaker, they can't kill your Henchclan Thug because it's been buffed up once, so you still have the potential to do a decent amount of damage to them, which is why I'd say it's still in your favor. Just control matchup is The Control Priest is probably closest to 50%, but still not even. Mage, Odd Mage, and Big Spell Mage wreck you. Not like super hard, but definitely are in their favor. But if you don't play into the removal, you can do okay. You can bring it up to a 50-50 if you learn how to play into it optimally, not play into a ton of their removal. You also have Leeroy and some charge minions, which means that, okay, sure, they Blizzard, but you Leeroy them and go face, and they're not actually able to respond to that. And Big Spell Mage doesn't get any of their removal until like turn 5, so you have 5 turns to do damage. And if you can draw Leeroy or like a South Sea Deckhand and pump it up, you can sometimes close out the game with that, but just don't overcommit. Or if you are going to overcommit, start overcommitting from the very beginning. So that way you are able to get a huge board and do as much damage as quickly as possible. Because that way, if they don't have Dragon's Fury on curve, you actually might just win the game off of it. Odd Mage is a little bit different. Sometimes you can actually bait out a like hero power from them on turn like 3 or 4 and slow their turn down, which is good for you. Like if you're able to make them do nothing on their turn 3 or 4 other than hero power one of your minions, you're just objectively gaining a mana advantage early on in the game, which can sometimes be enough to help you out and get you an advantage, but usually just because Odd Mage has that hero power and a ton of removal, it's not enough. But, you know, that's really the only thing you can do into that matchup. Druid will ignore. Paladin. Odd Paladin, you do better into now because Frostwolf Warlord's a big win condition for Odd Paladin, and you have the Vilespine Slayer to kill it. But it's still not great. OTK Paladin, tons of removal. It's basically like Warlock. It's not as bad as Warrior because it doesn't have as much armor health gain in total, but it's not as good for you as Warlock. So I'd say it's probably a little less than 50% because they have more pros than cons against you. But it's still definitely a winnable matchup if they're not able to have like Wild Pyromancer equality on turn 4. If they don't have that and they have to wait till turn 6 for an equality consecrate, that gives you like 6 turns to build up an advantage and do a ton of damage. So that can actually be enough sometimes. And even Paladin, Vilespine Slayer can deal with a buffed up minion fairly easily in most cases. Then there's Hunter. Secret and Spell Hunter are 40% win rates according to Hearthstone Replay. However, if you learn to use your weapon to play around these secrets optimally, it can definitely be increased to about 45, if not a little bit more. Will not be 50 because Hunter still has Spellstone, which this deck has no way of dealing with. Literally no way. Like, you have a way of assassinating 1. That's it. They still have 3 other wolves. Like, there's nothing you can do. But if you use the weapon optimally and you don't play the wrong minion first, like, don't play Firefly first, because if it's an explosive trap, it's killed. If you can, play Argent Squire or Dire Mortal first, so that way it survives that first trap. Always test the trap out with your weapon first, pretty much, so you don't lose your minion. And if it's a wandering monster, usually the 2 damage, or at least sometimes the 2 damage is actually enough to just kill the minion. So always test out with a weapon. Recruit / Death Rattle Hunter are also, they're good for you, actually. You can kill them before they can get off all of their Death Rattle synergies, or get to the point where their Recruit pops off. And if they do get out like a Grizzly because you use a lot of cards in your hand, you can Vilespine Slayer it and kill it and continue to go face potentially. Mid-range Hunter, that one's a little different with the Scavenging Hyena. Basically, that one's 50-50 in my opinion. It's basically just, if his Hyena pops off, you're screwed. If you can kill it early with like an SI agent or a buffed up weapon, his power is significantly weakened. Going into just the general mulligans, keeping all 1-drop minions and 3-drop minions in every matchup is pretty much good, except for South Sea Deckhand and Tar Creeper. Only keep those in the matchups you think are going to be aggro, and use them as a form of A, control with South Sea Deckhand, or B, stall with Tar Creeper. And if you go into control matchups, and you have Argent Squire and Cold Blood, keep the Cold Blood. When I say 1-drops, I did only mean minions. You usually mulligan Cold Blood and Deadly Poison. However, if you're playing against a control matchup, like a Warrior or a Warlock, and you're able to Argent Squire and then play another 1-drop and combo the Cold Blood onto the Argent Squire and get a 5/1 Divine Shield turn 2 and hit with it that turn, you can sometimes get 1, 2, 3 maybe even 4 hits out of it before they're actually able to do anything to it, because they have to hit once to get rid of the Divine Shield, and then once to actually kill it. So they have to use multiple cards to get rid of 2 mana worth of stuff, and you get anywhere from 10 to 20 damage out of it. It's absolutely insane. In terms of 3-drops, always priority Hench Clan Thug, unless you have the coin, in which case prioritize the Vicious Fledgling. If you coin that out on turn 2, get a free attack out of it, maybe get Wind Fury, hit, make it untargetable. Next thing you know, it snowballs way out of control. So that first turn, getting it out without the opponent having anything to do, can be absolutely huge with the Vicious Fledgling. So that's pretty much it on the guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. I pretty much gave you every single tip I could. Everything I said here applies to the fully made deck, which, again, you just put in Leeroy and Myra's, with the only difference being the fully made deck does have 2 Hail Mary plays in Leeroy Jenkins, being a 6 damage charge to maybe close out the game, and Myra's Unstable Element to draw your entire deck, and hopefully gain some options at the end of the game to close it out. So this deck just doesn't have the Hail Mary plays, but it still has the consistency and the aggression of the main one. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed making this guide. Feel free to look at any of my other guides, and I would very much recommend this deck. This deck was pretty good. Got me from rank 9 to rank 5 last season in one night over the course of like 40 games. I think I went like 28 and 12 or something, or 27 and 13, something pretty solid. So this deck as a whole is really good, and I would very much recommend it. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and see ya.